I was at an event last week, and one of the guys told a joke, and he was doing kind of a 1950s style country storytelling persona. He'd gotten into the character and did the entire thing, but the story that he told to the audience was mind-bogglingly 1950s in its sexism at the same time. I mean, overt and fat shaming. It was like making fun of fat mother-in-laws the entire time. And the audience was 2/3 older women. I thought, what is wrong with you? This is not the right place. There was, there were pauses for laughter. There was no laughter. It was painful to watch. So that was gross judgment error. Know your audience. It was well delivered, wrong context, pal.
If you want to command the room, connect the dots, and close the deal, well, you better not be brain dead about your audience like that storytelling dude obviously was. Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell. Joining us today is the author of the new book, Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice, Dr. Laura Sicola. She'll show you the science behind why even the smartest leaders lose the room and how to win it back. She's a cognitive linguist who's coached Fortune 500 leaders, advised TED speakers, and helped top executives at clients like Amazon and Kaiser Permanente become the voice of vision. Her own TED Talk has nearly 7 million views. Today, you'll discover her 3 C's of executive presence, why the movie in your head is never the one your audience is watching, and how to stop sounding like a spreadsheet for good. All that and more right here on the Business of Story, just for you. So glad you're with us today. Dr. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Park. Looking forward to the conversation.
I am too, because really this show is about connecting and disconnecting and trying to connect when you're actually disconnecting. And with your background in cognitive linguistics, I'm really, did I say that right? Linguistics. That's hard to say this morning.
Easy for you to say. Yes, that's exactly right.
What is that? What is your definition of that?
My definition and how it's relevant in my space, cognitive linguistics is looking at what it is about what you say and how you say it that makes it go in one ear and out the other for the listener, or go in and stick. And when you can figure out what it is that is creating that result, if you're doing it right and you like the results, how to keep doing it intentionally. And if you're not getting the results you want, how to figure out what you need to adjust to make it stick and do what you want. That's the key.
And how did you get in this world?
How did I get in that world? I come from a long background of education, and language focus has always been a thing. Ever since I was 5 and was fascinated with the fact that my grandmother spoke Spanish, which I was not raised speaking, and I just thought it was a superpower. She could kind of babble, and other people knew what it was.
Her
and
own
I was
secret
it was
language,
her code, yes. I was like, at 5, I thought, I want grandma's superpower, which I later learned is called Spanish. But I thought, I'm going to figure out how to do that. And so the fascination with languages began, and the need to be understood and the need to understand and to figure out whether it's as big as from Spanish to English or as small as what is it about the way that you pronounced that particular word that became a distraction for that other person, made them not hear the next statement and then go off on a different tangent.
And do you have a particular moment in your life that you can kind of point to that maybe there was a great misunderstanding going on and you're like, how come they're not getting this? And had sort of an aha moment that this was going to be your life's work?
I don't know that there was a single misfire that was a big enough of a pain point, so much as the realization of the desire, recognizing the gap that I can't understand this and I want to understand it. I remember when I was 16, that same grandmother took me to Chile for the first time. And it was where she was from, got to meet my relatives. I'd been studying just, 2 years of high school Spanish of sorts, and I could sort of muddle my way through. But I remember thinking to myself, how completely fascinating it was to be in this world of sound that was literally foreign to me. but also wanting to put a Post-it note on my forehead that said, "In my language, I'm smart." Because,
Okay.
right, when you're trying to muddle your way through 2 years of high school, whatever language worth of skill you still have in a particular language, it's frustrating. You wanna be able to make yourself understood. You know that you have ideas, you have questions, you wanna have fun, you see everybody else laughing, you wanna participate in that, but there's, like, something's missing. Why? And you don't wanna feel stupid, and you're afraid you do look and sound stupid to somebody else because 'cause you're talking like a five-year-old. And, it's all of these perceptions. What is it about the facility that you have with the language on the productive or the receptive front? And it could be Spanish to English or finance to engineering to sales. Those are all different languages too, right? Is it a big client? Is it an existing client? Is it somebody who doesn't know they should be a client? Who are
Yeah.
you talking to? And what is their native language? And how do you translate yours? That's the key, is how to translate so that you can hear and understand and be understood at the same time. So the biggest gap in the world is well, the 3 inches between your brain and your mouth for number one, but also the gap that we try to solve is the gap between what you think you said and what they think they heard. But that's where it all began.
Awesome. So that's the thing I'm really interested in. I say one thing, and I believe that they are getting it, but they are
Mhm.
hearing and thinking something completely different. Can you give us an example of that in action?
Oh, sure. Well, think of it this way. How many times have you had a conversation with somebody? It could be a coworker, it could be your significant other, could be a neighbor or your child, your parent, and you made a perfectly clear, coherent, logical, obvious point, and they respond to you, and you think to yourself, "How did you get that from what I said?" You ever have one of those moments?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So what's
Well,
going on there?
there are we'd need about 6 more episodes to fill out all the variables that are involved there, but it could be anything from, what was the conversation you had last week about this topic? Or tangentially about this topic that one or both of you are drawing from? Where are the assumptions coming in? Where are you guessing that they have more background or that they care more about it than you do? That one of you thinks it's more necessary than the other? One of you thinks, well, yes, it's valuable, but we have other priorities first that are coming in. For you, it might be a matter of, well, I think this should happen, so we should do it. And the other person is saying, you don't seem to understand that we got to go through 6 rounds of approvals first. We got to compare budgets. We have to look at our schedules. We have to look at capacity. I understand that this is important to you, and you're not the only person who matters to me with this particular topic. So there are so many things that could get involved.
So to get to the bottom of it, it sounds like I'm just going to totally make an assumption here. The number one effort that a person has to make is to truly understand their audience, what's going
Yes.
on between their audience's ears, and
Yep.
how am I going to communicate to them from their point of view,
Yes.
underscore what's in it for them. And then
Yep.
hopefully they are going to arrive at the solution that I am presenting. And therefore my influence and my persuasion goes up, and hopefully my trust.
Yes, of course. And I will put a caveat on that part because number one, yes, you need to do as much research as you can. And if nothing else, take a moment to consciously think about, to your point, who do you need to talk to and what are their needs? What are their concerns? What else are they weighing to the best that you can? If you do any amount of prep thought in that space, you will definitely do better than if you don't. That being said, there are obviously going to be many things that you can't guess. And you don't know if they just had a conversation right before the conversation with you where they got chewed out or they
Mhm.
were completely embarrassed in public for something that they got scapegoated on or something along those lines. So then you come up and you just happen to say a particular word that triggered them from that. And somehow you became the scapegoat and you're going, what just happened? How did you get that from what It's because there's way more that they brought into that conversation that they hadn't let go of yet that really wasn't about you. So a lot of the conversation that has to follow up is, okay, trying to figure out what happened and not just
Mhm.
fighting a grenade with a grenade. You're going to
Mhm.
yell at me, so I'm going to yell at you back. that doesn't usually result in peace. So, or resolution. So how do we move forward from here? That's the challenge, is how to figure out when something doesn't land right and redirect it so that you do come to the mutual place of understanding together.
Well, and quite often when something doesn't land right, how you find out is to see it in action in that triggered moment, correct?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
they go crazy and you're like, whoa, wait a second. That's not where I was going with this. What's going on? In that event, when that happens, what do you do to disarm that situation? Get that person to pump the brakes, take a deep breath, and sit down and have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a long one, but so that you can better understand where they're coming from.
There's a lot of techniques that you can do. The first one is to pause and breathe. Because when someone hits you with that adrenaline response or that negative response of some sort, our fight or flight reflexes kick in. And again, that is not the part of the brain that you want to let drive the ship. So, right?
Yeah,
Never ends well.
absolutely.
So, pause, take a breath, recognize that, okay, that didn't seem proportional or appropriate or something, and then approach with curiosity rather than defensiveness where possible. Of course, this will depend on, is there a power differential? Is there a timing issue at stake? What's going on? So everything is qualified by the it depends and then move forward. But you may want to approach with something like, uh, uh, this seems to have upset you. I didn't mean to upset you. Help me understand what is upsetting you. And then, getting a yes or a no is equally valid and equally useful if your goal is to understand in order to move forward productively. So if they say, well, yeah, it upset me because you did this and you did, okay, well, thank you for informing me. Now I know what I did. Whether or not I think it should upset you, that's a very different issue. Like, you got mad because I used that word. Do you really care? Apparently they do. You
Mhm.
cannot argue whether or not they should have gotten upset. It doesn't matter. The fact is they did. So now you got to work with that. And if they say, no, well, it's not that I'm upset. It's that this. Okay, well, thank you. Now I also have data. So using a label, if you ever read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, great book
Mhm.
on negotiations. He calls them labels. So it seems like this really bothers you, or it sounds like you're unhappy with something, or it looks like this is something that. So just to label it that way, you're saying, this is my observation. If I'm right or wrong, tell me either way, because it's
Mhm.
useful information for me. And then we'll try to get back on track together.
Yeah. And you've got this book, Speaking to Influence, right?
Yes.
So when I first read that, I thought, okay, I'm a speaker, I'm on stage, and I'm trying to influence a very large crowd. And heaven forbid, I should be sharing something, saying something one way, thinking I'm going to move that audience when they hear me doing something completely different.
Mhm.
Their takeaway is completely different. But what we've been talking about so far is really one-on-one interpersonal communications.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about your book and what is the through line there? Is it just interpersonal one-on-one or is it the bigger picture?
Bigger picture, 100% bigger picture.
Yeah.
Because though, even when I'm giving a keynote, I'm getting ready to go to Texas next week to do a keynote at a conference, and this happens to be a group of women in a particular industry. So the stories that I use, the examples that I use, some of the specific details that I share will be tailored for that audience. The principles of the talk are the same as if I were speaking to a men's audience or to an all gender audience, or to a different industry at that point, because I want the examples to be as relevant as possible to that group. So that there's always how do you adapt this so that it's as relevant as possible to the person you're speaking to? So whether it's one-on-one with a family member or with your team or on a stage or here on a podcast, the rules always apply. It's just a matter of how they apply.
Yeah. And you've got a framework, right? This 3 C's
Mhm.
framework. Can you walk us through that so our audience can kind of walk away and go, oh, yeah, maybe I'll try that next time and have a little bit more influence and persuasive power when I'm speaking to someone or a crowd?
Happy to. The idea is that executive presence, which is a big X factor for a lot of people, right? Is it the it factor, the leadership presence, the X factor, et cetera? The idea is there are 3 C's that you want to master, and it's the ability to command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal. So if we break that down real quick, commanding the room is simply from the minute that you show up, the minute you click the join meeting button, or the minute you walk into the room or on the stage, there's something about your presence, the way that you carry yourself, that shows a confidence, that shows a strength, an overpowering, domineering strength, but something that makes the audience sit up and take notice and lean in, curious to hear what you've got to say. Number 2, connecting with the audience, no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, and how different your respective priorities and intentions and interests are, on some level, you're going to find a point of connection that you're going to ride forward together that says, on this point, you understand me and I understand you. You work that together. And then the third C is closing the deal. That does not necessarily mean it's sales, signing on the dotted line, et cetera. It can if you happen to be in a business development role of some sort or negotiating to buy a new car for yourself. But closing the deal simply means getting to yes, coming to an agreement together, making a decision, simply moving the needle forward. I'm sure many of your listeners, like my business, there are very few even business development or sales conversations that are one and done. You have one conversation to say, I'm in, send me the invoice. I wish there were more that were like that. That would make my life a lot easier. But the idea is simply, this is the first conversation. Did we get to the point where we're going to have a follow-up to discuss budgets? Is there a meeting next where I'm going to meet with the other major decision makers involved? Is there a next step where we're going to talk to finance or somebody else? Are we moving the needle forward step by step together? That's closing the deal.
All right. And number 1, the first C was what?
Command the room.
That's it. Command. I was just writing these down. Okay. Let's walk through all 3 of these. And if it's all right with you, could we take your presentation next week to the women's group in Texas, for example? So how would you prepare for that we all could learn from? Number 1, how are you going to step on this stage and immediately command the room to the best of your abilities?
In part, I am going to have a conversation just with the organizers before I get on to identify something that they've been discussing among themselves. What's been a hot topic, a frustration, a concern, a something they liked, a success or a win that they've had. And preferably since the conference began or just in the day or 2 leading up to it, because I want to try to incorporate that as one of my openers, to make it a connection, to ride the wave so that they're already in flow with me when we start.
Okay.
I also want to know, what is the dress code? Is this a business casual kind of conference? Is this no, everybody's very happy in, jeans and sweatshirts and whatever else on this one. Okay, this is much more comfortable, casual style. I did one talk, a program that was out a couple of years ago in Denmark. And it was, if you can imagine this is a big difference between American asset managers and Northern European, Scandinavian asset managers. Can you imagine 1,500 American, New York-based asset managers going on an annual retreat out into the woods so that they could camp on cots in tents for 3 days? Can you see that happening?
Sounds wonderful.
Maybe at the Waldorf Astoria, but I don't see that happening up in the Catskills in tents with American, asset managers. But that's what they did out there. So it was, I had to think, well, what goes with rain boots as I was packing my outfits for the conference, and what stories could I tell that were more relevant to that nature of that experience? So who's your audience? What kinds of experiences are they planning to have, or did they just have? And how do you draw on that?
Okay, so that's interesting. When you said command the room, I was kind of first picturing a physical commanding of the room, and you talk about that, knowing that you're wearing the right things, and you show up and you hear people say, "Do that Superman pose," and I'm not really quite sure
I'm
if
not
that
a big one of that.
Superman pose works. Doesn't work for me anyways. But it's also, as you said, is do some research and figure out what they've been talking about, as you pointed, what the hot topics are, so that you can speak to those right off the
Mhm.
bat to build trust. That
Yep.
so people in the crowd are saying, "Wow, she actually understands us or appreciates
So
where we're
that's the
coming from,"
connecting,
right?
right? So the
Mm-hmm.
command right from the beginning, walk on stage confidently. Have a
Mm-hmm.
smile on your face. Make eye contact with people. Own your space. It doesn't matter if I'm 5 foot nothing. I don't take up a lot of space on a conference stage, but I'm going to own it. I will own
Yeah.
the whole thing. I'm going to own the whole audience, and everybody, no matter where they're sitting, at some point is going to feel like I'm talking right to them. That's my
Well,
goal.
I if you are a speaker, and this is a ubiquitous you, at a conference and a keynoter, wouldn't you already have that command of the room because you're doing this? Or are you talking really more about people that have been kind of thrust in that position? "Hey, Larry, we're gonna have our big sales kickoff next week, and I need you to get up and give a 20-minute presentation on whatever." And Larry's like, "Oh, crap. Really?" And so then Larry
Well,
he schleps up there, and Larry's not owning anything. But to me, it seems like people would already, if they're already in our line of work, would already naturally own the stage or command it. No?
so there's a grayscale, I think, of
Yeah.
those for how I mean, what kind of a stage is it? Is it in front of 10,000 or in front of 150? Is it your first time? Is it something that you can do in your sleep? But you've done it so much. Is it something that you've tested, or are you trying out something new? I find a lot of people. So one of my tools is that whenever I can, I video record my performances, and then I will go back and watch some of it, maybe not all of it, but there are certain parts that I wanna go back and check because I wanna make sure that what I said and what I delivered looked to everybody else like it did to me. Because
Mhm.
how many times do you make a little video of like a birthday message to send somebody, something super simple, and you watch it on your phone 10 seconds after you recorded it and you go, "Oh my God, I sounded like an idiot. Okay, note does I got to redo this one." Right? It's like that sounded better in my head. But you were there. You just made it 10 seconds ago. Why are you surprised at what you saw? At what you heard? Yeah, but we are. So we need to recognize, did I command the room? Maybe you fidgeted the entire time. Maybe you didn't realize that you kept touching your face as you were talking or musing something out. Like, maybe you didn't realize that you were not just moving across the stage to own different parts of it, but you were just pacing back and forth,
Mm.
wearing a rut in the stage the entire time. So the intention was good, the focus and the plan was good, but the execution missed the mark. That's important to
Mhm.
realize.
Mm. All right, let's move to number 2, second
Mhm.
C of connecting. Now you're commanding the stage, you've got their attention. They're like, "Hey, this person actually has something important to tell us." How do you deepen that connection with your audience?
As I referenced earlier, the specific details that you share, the examples that you give, the analogies that you use need to be ones that will resonate with that organization. If you're talking to a bunch of people who are, artists and not athletes, I'm not going to use a lot of golf analogies. It's not going to make sense necessarily, or I'm not going to make references to something. The list of things I won't do is much longer than the list of things I should do. So, point being, be very judicious in choosing examples that will be as relevant and powerful to them as you can. Even the number of details, the amount of weeds that you go into, as it were. Do they need the specifics, or is it way too much and they're just waiting for you to move on?
Yeah. How do you know what anecdotes to tell to connect with that audience?
Sometimes it depends on like, in the beginning, often I'll tell a story to warm up the audience, and it's something that I think they will appreciate. So, just going back to the experience in Denmark, I speak a couple of languages. Danish wasn't one of them. So when I got the invitation, I thought, "Oh, you know what? Let me play with Duolingo for a few months and see what I can pick up." Well, spoiler, you can't pick up much of anything in 2 to 3 months on Duolingo. You get vocabulary, but nothing particularly useful. But in this organization, in this audience, it was a pan-European group. So, everybody was able to use English as the kind of lingua franca and to allow me to speak in English for my talk. But I also knew most of them spoke 2, 3, 4, 5 languages. So I did a little survey in the beginning. How many of you speak 2, speak 3, et cetera? And we figured out who spoke the most languages there, which is interesting for them to see as well. And then, I acknowledged how much effort that takes, not just to be conversational, but to be able to do this kind of work in a second or third or fourth language. And the fact that, I had even tried to learn a little bit of Dutch to come here, excuse me, Danish to come there. But really at this point, all I learned to say was, and in Danish, I said something like, the boys and girls eat rice, which was one of the few sentences I'd figured out. And the whole place burst out laughing and gave me a full round of applause just for doing that. And so I laughed at myself. It was a moment of humility, but not humiliation. Right. It
Mhm.
was sort of acknowledging them, recognizing the challenges involved, and also saying, so look, as an American and a native English speaker, if I use jargon, if I speak too quickly, if I do whatever, please feel free to raise your hand and ask me to slow down, to explain something, to use a different term. And maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, but I'm acknowledging that I can imagine where they are. If it were me sitting in their seat and it was reversed, this is what I would want the speaker to do. So
Mhm.
just showing that empathy, that emotional intelligence, that recognition and respect for them. I saw a lot of heads doing very slow nods of the thank you for the acknowledgement. And of course, making fun of myself with my 6 words of butchered Danish
Yeah.
helped to endear me to them without losing respect as an authority on my subject. So then we switch to really, okay, now here's what we're here to talk about today. So that was the connection piece from a story.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because whenever I'm doing my training or speaking, I'll do as you say, research your audience, really understand where they're coming from, and then I'll always, and I mean always, lead with a connection story. Because if I
Mhm.
can't connect with them in that first 90 seconds, I'm sunk. And give you an example, I was hired to work a developer conference, and it was in computer coders, developers back in 2016.
Mm.
And when I got there, it was up in Sacramento, and there's about 150 of them in the room. The show's sponsor that brought me in, and we were going to be talking all about storytelling. And he kind of chided me, kidded me a little bit. He goes, "You realize pretty much this entire room thinks storytelling is bullshit. You know, they're so right. Just so you know that they're not going to be a friendly crowd. You're going to have to win them over."
Mhm.
So I went on stage, and Dr. Laura, what I did is I said, "Hey, great to be here with you today. Let me see a show of hands with all the work that you all do in developing and coding and whatever. Is it fair for me to say, because I don't, I'm not in your world, but is it fair to me to ask that your number one priority is user experience, no matter
Mm.
what happens with that software, with that SaaS product, with that app or whatever? It's all about user experience." And they all, "Yeah, well, of course it is," kind of thing. And so then I said, well, let me make a comparison here that storytelling is nothing more than the software that drives the hardware of our meaning making limbic brain. And you can break it down to code. I'm going to teach you the and but therefore algorithm. I'm going to teach you the 5 primal elements in the 10-step story cycle system. They are all algorithms to the software that drives the hardware of our brain. And the bottom line is, don't you want the best user experience possible with that person you're talking to, or
Mhm.
you are trying to get to buy into your way of, thinking, doing? And they were all nodding like you are right there.
Right.
And that it was at that point that I knew I had them. So then I asked them, how many here think storytelling is bullshit? And at that point, about half of the room's hands went up instead of
Mhm.
all of them. But then over the course of the 90 minutes and showing them it in action, having them work through their and but therefores, and demonstrating that stories are really the software that drives the hardware of our meaning making machine. At the end of it, they gave me a standing ovation. And when I
Nice.
was done, the sponsor was like, "I can't believe how you changed their minds." But it goes back to that idea of you got to connect with them on their terms and speak to them from their point of view. In their case, it's software development. And
Yes.
it worked
Yes.
really, really, really. I was very proud of myself, but I knew
Sure.
it was going to work. But that's what I try to do too, is get, my friends and family and those speaking out there to find that connection story right off the bat.
Absolutely. And to speak into their truth. You know what their
Yeah.
assumptions are. You know what you're thinking. You're like, you called a spade a spade. How many of you think this is my topic today is bullshit? And they were like, yep, thank you. At least you know where we are. We got nothing to hide, as long.
Right.
And I've done the same thing. I'll approach most of when I'm doing trainings for teams, it's typically finance or tech, the real numbers people, as opposed to the letters people, just broadly generalizing. And so there are a few analogies that I will share in the beginning. And it's like, I'll back up for a second and say, let me just put this out there as a preface. Get this. I am a Jersey Italian. We don't do woo woo. That's not my thing. And so they'll kind of smile and sigh. So work with me on this. Follow. So it's like, I've already set the expectation. I'm not going to go down the cutesy, but I do need to make this, mental picture for you. So humor me on it. And if you can get them to laugh either at themselves or with you, or preferably both, that little dopamine hit is an appreciation for you. It makes them unconsciously like you and thus be willing to give you that benefit of the doubt. So a
Hmm.
little bit of humor in a story, even in a hard story, just that
Yeah.
one little surprise chuckle can, oh my gosh, does that break through barriers?
Oh, it goes a long way. And I just was recently working with Navy Federal Credit Union and 110 of their internal auditors, and it was all
Mm,
about helping them find the narrative behind the numbers so that the numbers make sense to the people that they're talking to.
mhm,
And one of the first things I started with, and I wasn't sure, Dr. Laura, if it was going to work or not, but I went for it. And I'll do this quite a bit when I'm dealing with numbers people, financial
mhm.
people. I'll just ask them, I'll ask you this question right here. Dr. Laura, what is the first syllable in the word numbers?
Numb.
And then they all look at each other and go, oh, wow. And I say, your numbers make no sense to that Homo sapien brain sitting across from you until and unless you put them in the context of a story. And that
Yes.
really always lands very well with them. They're like, oh, never thought about it that way. Tell
Yep.
me more.
Yep. And I'll usually follow with that kind of idea, and I will acknowledge the credit of here's the problem. You are experts, and you have the burden of needing to talk to, let's call them muggles, as it were. And everybody will just, there's like a slight second pause, and then the whole room breaks up because they understand the Harry Potter reference is, non-magical beings, or I'll say, otherwise, mortals. Think of it this way. And I'll use those kinds of labels, and the whole place cracks up and they get the point. Because let's face it, they tend to think that they're a little smarter than everybody else. We all think we're smarter than everybody else in whatever our area of genius is. So when you got to handle those who are not, we need to take these kinds of approaches like stories.
Yeah, I love it. And take some risks too, right? I mean, I
Yes.
imagine you find yourself on stage or in that room and you're like, I'm not sure if I should really say this, but I kind of reading the room. I think it's going to work. Let's go for it. And then take a risk on telling that story. I'm not saying something so off color that you're going to offend somebody,
Right.
but call a spade, as you had said earlier. What's really
Sure.
happening in this room right now?
Exactly, exactly. And often they are calculated risks. There's especially for the tech and finance spaces and whatnot. If I have the time, it depends on how much time I've got in the course of to run a workshop, um, to demonstrate the fact that words have a direct impact. What the words are and how they're delivered has a direct impact in the brain of the person on the chemical makeup, the chemistry of someone's brain, the hormones, whether you've got more adrenaline or dopamine or something else coursing, and that changes the receptivity to you. To demonstrate that, I will use a little neurolinguistic programming technique where I'll find someone in the audience who has we'll call it a food addiction of sorts, like, oh, I can't say no to chocolate, or, oh my gosh, nachos, I'm doomed, or soda or something. And in 15 minutes, I can get that person to no longer desire that food and
Hmm.
not want to see it anymore, not want to go, even if it's in their bag for lunch, they're going to go get something else. The last group that I was in front of, it was um, somebody was talking about, oh, for holiday baking, there's a particular kind of icing. And if the icing is on the cookies or on the cake, that's all there is to it. It's like she just has to eat the whole can of icing, or she'll eat the icing off the cookies and the cake and forget the cookie and the cake itself. And it's just this terrible thing. And 15 minutes later, we got her to be suddenly not interested and not want to bake those cookies anymore. So in that is a very powerful thing where you're watching this happen. There's no swinging watch. There's no let's lay down on the couch and tell me about your childhood. There's nothing else involved. It's a very simple technique, but it has to be done right. And for everybody else watching, they're going, that shouldn't have worked. What just happened? Why did that work? It's like you all were witnessing, you all saw, you all heard. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. And that's because of, I know exactly what words I use, exactly what order I use them, how I delivered them, what mattered, all the nuances that for you go under the radar, for the coders out there, I know the code. You just know the user interface. Those details all matter. You just saw evidence for yourself. So I need you to trust me that when I tell you later in this workshop that you need to adjust these details, you need to not just dismiss it and go, that doesn't seem like it should matter, because it does. And you now have proof. And that's sort of, you have to get that buy-in in the beginning that, okay, maybe I need to give her the benefit of the doubt, the language person, the soft skills person. Nope, I'm a scientist just like you are.
So in your book, Speaking to Influence, do you share tips in these words and how to use them to kind of magically cast that spell on your audience member?
I don't do. So I wrote the book before I was involved with NLP, so I'm not including any of those techniques
Okay.
intentionally. But there is plenty in the book about how to choose the right words, the amount of detail, the relevance factor. It's all about the 3 C's, and in particular, where how to establish credibility is first and foremost rooted in the importance of establishing alignment between what you say and how you say it, the words, the voice, and the body language. So we really dig into all of those, well, at least many, many details that fall under those 3 categories that, again, if you're only knowing the user interface of language, I hear English, I talk in English, we have English, okay, but you're unaware of how, when you put those teeny details together, it can be the difference between sounding trustworthy and confident versus arrogant.
Mhm. Do you have an
Or,
example on that? Do you have
oh,
like
sure.
a go-to line that says, you said you're trying to come across trustworthy and confident, but you're actually coming across arrogant?
Oh, sure. Well, so a two-parter on that. First, 2 words. Nice haircut versus nice haircut. Big difference.
Right.
And just a little difference in the speed, in the tonality pattern, that tiny difference in delivery makes it immediately go from compliment to insult, from direct to passive aggressive. And so those nuances matter. And one of the exercises that I often have clients do is to take their phone and we'll do a little 30 to 60-second video recording. So something like, let's say you have to give um, some constructive feedback to an underperforming employee. Okay, well, you want to come across as clear but supportive, but help them understand what needs to change. And so this is a very common one that we end up working on. And people will sit down and say, okay, so hi, Bob, thanks for coming in today. Let's talk about, want to look at X. And then we watch the video 60 seconds later and they go, oh my gosh, I sound like such a jerk saying that. Or I sound like I'm going to cry, like I'm afraid to tell them what it is. Really? Interesting. So what is it? You thought you were being nice, but you sounded like a jerk. You were trying to be clear and supportive, and you sounded like you were going to cry, like you were afraid to tell them the truth. You didn't realize that in the process. So now we have to reverse engineer what you actually did into observable behaviors, very specific, objective. This was the speed that you spoke at. Here's what you emphasized. How many times did you pause? All of these things are not subjective, right? You either said 10 times or you didn't say 10 times, objective behaviors. Subjective interpretation is, okay, so since you did that, what impression did it seem to make to you? Oh, blabbering and unconfident and nervous. Okay, so then we have to work on those behaviors to be able to shift the perception that's coming out of it.
So it's not so much the use of the words, it's how you tell them, how you
Well, the
express.
words matter too, because if you the what you say and how you say it are two
Mhm,
sides of the coin, and you can't have one without the other. If you think about it in terms of building a house, you need the foundation first. Then you can put up the walls. You can't just put the walls up on the ground. I
mhm,
suppose you could, but at the first rain, you're gonna have a really soggy floor inside. So the if I wanna give you some constructive feedback, I can be as nice as possible, but if I say, "Park, I mean, I think you're an idiot. I don't really think you belong here, but, it's hey, no offense, right?" You can say, "I'm sorry. What just because you said it nicely, you still called me an idiot. I would screw you." That's not
yeah,
so it's not just how you say it. The what you say matters. Just to, as our we were discussing earlier, when you told a story, when you used an example, was it a relevant example? Was it a
mhm.
relevant story? Um, and is it something that they will understand and relate to? Is it something they'll find offensive instead of funny? So, yes, the content that you say is the foundation. Then you have to deliver it right. Otherwise, let's face it, any good joke falls flat if it's
Yeah.
not told right. So, it is absolutely both. You cannot have one without the other.
So this seems very obvious coaching, but why are we so blind to it?
Because the movie that plays inside our head is not the same as the movie that everybody else watches when we talk. It is there's only so many things you can pay attention to at once, and there's only so many variables you can consciously be aware of. So, to our original point earlier at the start of our conversation, you may not know that that person just came out of a really hard meeting where they lost an account or they got terrible news from home on the phone right before it. So they're just not in a place to feel charitable right now or to do whatever else. Your timing just universal stroke of bad luck had nothing to do with you. If you'd spoken to them yesterday or wait till tomorrow or after lunch when they're not hangry, you can get a very different response. So some of those factors you can't control. And some of those you may just have made a judgment error. Like I was at an event last week and the one of the guys told a joke and he was doing kind of a 1950s style country storytelling persona. He'd gotten into the character and did the entire thing, but the story that he told to the audience was mind-bogglingly 1950s in its sexism at the same time. I mean, overt and fat
Yeah.
shaming. It was like making fun of fat mother-in-laws the entire time, and the audience was two-thirds older women. I thought, what is wrong with you? This is not the right place. There was, there were pauses for laughter. There was no laughter. It was painful to watch. So that was gross judgment error. Know your audience, much less the timing. It was well delivered by the standards of the intention of the era of the story, blah, blah, blah. Wrong context, pal.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, we've all been
If
there.
only it
We've seen
were.
that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, and so awkward because you get to a
Yes.
point of you're looking at that speaker and you go, "Oh, I feel so bad for them. What did they miss? How could they be so stupid?"
Oh,
Basically,
yeah.
no
It was
filter.
painful.
It
Nope.
happens. Well,
And he
that's
meant well,
great.
that's the thing, he really was obtuse. I'm sure he had no idea, that was he was older also, I'm sure that was probably part of the humor he grew up with, but
Yeah.
somehow he really missed the
He
memo that said that era passed many decades ago. It's
he
time
didn't
to,
connect
not
to
move
the
on.
room. Yeah, yeah.
Totally missed it, or the
Exactly right.
decade.
Well, it's fascinating. Where can people find your book?
Amazon is a very easy place to go. You can also find it on my website, which is laurasicola.com. It's available in paperback, Kindle, as well as Audible. Although, if after this conversation you're tired of the sound of my voice, don't do the Audible version. I do read my own book.
You have a lovely voice. No, I imagine it's fantastic. And like we do with all of our guests, we ran your brand through our Story Cycle Genie, and I
Mm,
sent you over the findings
fascinating.
a few days ago. Yeah, what did
Yes.
you think of it?
You know what I liked about it, Park, was that it really did a good job of essentializing who the audience is and what they would find most powerful, either in the pain point or in the desired goal. It was really impressive how tight the language was.
Yeah, and you had told me earlier, before we started recording that you were in
Mhm.
the throes of redoing your website, so the
Mhm.
timing was pretty good, and
Yep.
that there were some ways, some things in there that it revealed to you, because it really, it validates what you're already doing well because it
Sure.
simply visited your website and said,
Yep.
"Here's how Dr. Laura's showing up in the world." It reveals gaps that you could close. There's some really, I thought, found some really interesting ones in there that seemed very obvious that you could be pushing a lot harder in there. And then finally, it inspired you with some new ways to think about telling your story. What were some of those inspirational moments in there?
Let me pull that one up. But I think it was helping me to realize where, um sorry, let me pull these here.
Oh, that's okay.
I appreciated the fact that it was really highlighting, to your point, recognizing that I wasn't leveraging enough the fact that I'm the only executive communication coach who applies the cognitive science of language and how it's processed in the brain, um, to really the results that people are going to get. And actually, I think it was the 9 words that you had, the O exercise or the OO exercise. How do you say it?
Yeah, OO and the OOO stands for organization, offering, and outcomes, and these are 3 one-word descriptors for each category that you could
Yes.
then use, Dr. Laura, as story themes to
Yep.
talk about what you bring to the world.
So I think that was the best because I've done a lot of exercises myself trying to figure out how to get it down into 3-word phrases or how to get it things down into, the key essence concepts, and it was nice to have these 9 single words that were, um, brand specific, brand unique as a combination. So for the organization, it was scientific, rigorous, and transformative. Very clear. Offering what's the offering? It's my offering is empowering, it's precise, and it's illuminating, and that the outcomes that I give people are about greater authority, greater influence, and greater advancement opportunities, ready for succession planning, et cetera. And those are all 100% accurate. I don't think I would have come up with those 9 purely as they are, but they are very, consistently what my brand is all about.
Yeah, and you think about them as your character traits,
Mhm.
you are about advancement, an outcome of helping people, and in the genie itself, it gives you then the explanation as to why it came up with advancement. It said advancement captures the career and organizational trajectory outcome, the
Mhm.
promotions earned, the opportunities open, the legacy built, and the organizational performance improvements achieved through communication mastery. And it goes on with a couple more sentences.
Yep.
So, if that's you find that accurate for your brand, then Dr. Laura, what I would do, challenge you when you are creating your next website is give us 2 or 3 stories that show advancement in action. It's not enough for the brand just to say, "We're about an advancement and here's why."
Yep.
That's the chest pounding. What I want to hear is about people you've helped that have experienced that advancement. So the reader of that story or that anecdote can say, "I wanna be that person." You're proving it, right?
Yep. The case studies of
Yeah.
success.
Case studies, and even approaching the case study differently in that the case study is always about one individual, not an organization, not a team,
Right.
not a whatever. And that individual by proxy then can represent the greater whole. And
Yes.
that's what a lot of people get wrong in storytelling is they talk about how they helped a company. Well, most readers don't really care about that company, but they do care about Sally who's
Yes.
in that company and how you help Sally. And then again, by proxy, the spillover help that, you gave to the team and the division and the company and so forth.
I think the part that a lot of people miss with the story is in that hero's journey kind of a thing um, when it comes to those case studies that people want to read about the character. Because they wanna see themselves in that person's shoes. So, they don't care what I did for somebody else as far as the steps I took or the processes we went through. They wanna hear that character say, "Here's where I was, and I was unhappy. I worked with you, and here's where I am, and now I'm happy." Because the reader's going to say, "Oh, I am where that person used to be too, in that unhappy space, and if she got you to that happy place, maybe she can get me there too." That's
Yeah.
the key.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the stories transport the audience into that story. Their brain lives it just as if they were there, or it lives it just as they want the same thing that person has, but they
Yes.
don't have it yet, so I need to talk with Dr. Laura. Let's jump to the brand purpose statement
Mhm.
because I'm curious how that landed with you. This is, the ninth step in my 10-step story cycle system is basically the moral of the story as to why you exist, why any brand exists beyond making money. How do you actually level people up? And it says, Dr. Laura Sicola exists to empower leaders to bridge the gap between their expertise and their influence, so the brilliant thinking the world needs actually gets heard.
Yeah, I really like that. I love the fact that it's um, because we do have that expert's curse, as we were talking about before, that we are very confident in our skill, in our technical expertise, and we're frustrated that people don't say yes more often, that others don't just get it, that whether it's a client or prospect, the board of directors, other collaborators, legislators, whoever you're trying to convince, it's that frustration of why don't you get it? Why isn't it so clear to you as it is to me? So my expertise should make this point obvious to you, but it isn't. So I'm not having the influence. So that idea about how to close the gap between their expertise and their influence. So the influence is as strong as your expertise should warrant in your own mind. It's a great way to look at it. Great gap.
Okay, Dr. Laura, I think you've got a freebie or two for our audience for listening.
Yes, I would love to give people a taste of that, of everything we've been talking about, frankly. So, what I'll share, and you can add it to the show notes, is a link to download 2 chapters from my book, From Speaking to Influence. And it'll really help you look more deeply at yourself, at what you try to figure out what it is about what you're saying and how you're saying it that's just not making it land the way you want it to land. So, we'd be happy to offer that to your listeners.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Laura. And let's see, you've sent them to the website. I imagine you're on LinkedIn. Any other
Mhm.
place you want to send people to learn more about what you do?
LinkedIn and the website are the main ones.
Hmm.
You can certainly follow us also on Instagram and Facebook, uh, X. We're on all the major platforms, although the others are the LinkedIn and the website are the primary ones. And when in doubt, you can go to my TED Talk. So if you want a 15-minute deep dive into, okay, what exactly is she talking about with this whole 3 C's and prismatic voice and all that kind of stuff. It's a 15-minute overview to get a sense of, is it worth reading this book? Do I want to look into more? So I would encourage people to check out my TED Talk. It's called Want to Sound Like a Leader? Start by saying your name right. And it's got over 7 million views now, so it can't be that bad.
Awesome. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes too.
Great.
So thank you so much for being here. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciated it, Park.
Hey, well, thanks for being with us today for this show. And if you know of anyone who's going to benefit from Dr. Laura Sicola's advice, please share the episode with them. Now, I hope you'll join me next Monday when James Taylor, no, not the singer, but an amazing rock star of a marketer who's literally worked with a ton of rock stars, is going to be here. He's got a new book called Super Creativity, Augmenting Human Creativity in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. We explore AI and how you can actually use artful intelligence to make your brand story resonate with the world. And of course, you can do that using our Story Cycle Genie at storycyclegenie.ai. Go and get your free brand story grade right now at storycyclegenie.ai. Hope to see you next week, and until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one excellent. Thanks so much for listening.